Heidi-ho neighbors, Radio Goji here, and welcome to a toy review. Now, you may remember back when I last talked about Super Sentai mechs, basically when I finished with the Q-Ranger Deluxe Mech series, or the Q-Tamagetai series, I mentioned that, yeah, I'm pretty much going to be done with Super Sentai Deluxe robot sets for another 10 years, and well, as you can probably tell by looking at this, that didn't happen. This is the what currently exists of the VS Vehicle series from the newest Super Sentai show, Kaito Sentai Lupinranger versus Keisatsu Sentai Patranger, or Thief Squadron and Police Squadron. Anyway, just for clarity, just for, simplicity's sake, I'm just going to call it Lupinranger versus Patranger from here on out. The basic premise is that for the first time, we actually have two main Sentai teams from the outset. So it's not like a Hurricaneger and Go Rider or Go Onger and Go on Wings sort of situation. We actually have the Lupinrangers and the Patrangers. Both of them are there from the beginning, and they are kind of like rival Sentai teams. You've got the Lupinrangers, who are a bunch of phantom thieves, as you can probably tell by their name. They're named after Arsène Lupin, the literary gentleman thief from the novels by Maurice Leblanc. But in fact, Lupin was actually an actual person in the story, as he had a collection of mystical artifacts known as the Lupin Collection that he left behind, I think was how they phrased it, and was then mostly scooped up by a bunch of bad guys, basically a bunch of international gangsters known as the Ganglars. And the Lupinrangers have been recruited to try to get that collection back using their awesome thief skills and toys. On the other side of things, though, we also have the Patrangers, who are basically the Sentai sort of section, department, I guess you could say, of the global police. So not quite Interpol, but they're called Global Police, and they've got their own Sentai group, the Patrangers, who are trying to stop the Ganglars because the Ganglars are bad. I think more recently they're starting to go after the Lupin Collection too to keep it out of evil's hands. But because one team are thieves and one team are the police, they'll never get along. Oh no! But in all honesty, it is actually a very, very interesting show so far. I've really been enjoying it. I'm up to episode 6 at the moment, so I am a little bit behind. But yeah, I really do like it so far, and I'm really interested to see where a lot of the narrative is going to go. So anyway, the VS Vehicle series are the kind of two things in one. They are the robots, or the components for robots, but they're also the transformation trinkets for their gun morpher things called VS Changers. I do not have a VS Changer. I don't particularly want one, so I didn't get one. But these will... They have little, like, code bars on the bottom that'll, you slide them on and it'll read it, and basically the gun will make different sounds for each toy. And because of the way these were marketed, distributed, and sold, I actually bought all of these separately. These were all packaged separately. And I guess there's a reason for that. You see, when the Toyland first launched, in the week leading up to the premiere of the show, the central component here, Good Striker, I'll get to him later, did not come out. In fact, the only way that you could get any of the VS vehicles was through either getting a VS Changer, which would come with either the Red Dial Fighter or Trigger Machine number 1, depending on which kind of packaging you wanted. And then all of the vehicles, including the Red Ranger vehicles, would be sold separately. And they were. Now, when Good Striker came out a couple weeks later, that's when, around the time in the show where the robots made their debuts, they did release Good Striker separately, obviously, but they also did have robot bundles from there on, basically featuring Good Striker and the Dial Fighter, either Good Striker and the Dial Fighters, or Good Striker and the Trigger Machines. But because the robot... My plan was to get like one of the robot bundles and like the other 3 vehicles separately, but the robot bundles were completely sold out at the time. And as it turns out, I did some addition on the retail pricing. It's actually cheaper to get these separately. So I think I came out ahead. As far as boxes are concerned, I'm not going to show off every single box because they're very much the same in content. They have this kind of thing where normally the flap is on the back and it'll have this, but actually the front of the box is now against the flap here. Basically just has a picture of whatever's on the front, on the sides and stuff, and then on the back saying, you can use this in the VS changer or you can make a Robbit, and also Robbits and stuff on the top. And then Good Strikers was like basically the same sort of thing, except it's like you can transform him and use him in the VS changer and make a Robbits and stuff. And of course we have auxiliary vehicles as well. They have similar packaging to the individual vehicles, except it's like you can use in the VS changer and modify your Robbit. But I digress. So basically this toy line can be separated at current can be separated into three categories. First off, we have the Dial Fighters, which are the vehicles used by the Lupinrangers. So-called Dial Fighters because they are all planes or air vehicles of some manner, and they have these combination dials on the tops. The Patrangers use the Trigger Machines, which are all based off of cars and other land vehicles, and are so-called Trigger Machines because they say mean things on the internet. No, just kidding. They have triggers on the back to activate their action functions. And then the third category is the aforementioned Good Striker, as opposed to Bad Striker, or could have been Better Striker. Good Striker is a kind of autonomous third-party sort of component. He basically is footloose and fancy-free and just kind of goes with whatever team he wants to at the time. He has both a Dial Fighter mode and a Trigger Machine mode, and also forms the central component for both teams' robots. We'll be looking at him later. I'm basically going to start off with the, basically kind of a timeline thing going on here. I'm going to start, because this is a roundup video for like everything that's out now. So I'm going to start off with the three main Dial Fighters, to go to the three main Trigger Machines, talk about Good Striker, show off the robots, and then go to the two auxiliary components, because this is a modern Sentai show after all, and show off the, the components and combinations and stuff like that with them. Okay, so first off we have the Red Dial Fighter, and all of the Dial Fighters are named after their colors, or at least the main ones are. This is used by Lupin Red, and it's very much a jet, and it's very sleek look. I mean, obviously the combination dial is going to get rid of some of the aerodynamic sleekness. That's a Privateer reference, if you believe it or not. But yeah, it looks really cool. I like the sleekness of the jet look. Now, the thing with each of the VS vehicles is that other than Good Striker, they have two modes. Well, I mean, Good Striker has two modes as well, but I'll get to that later. The main component VS vehicles have a normal mode and an attack mode. And attack mode in these cases are just, it's just a fancy term for transform into a robot component, but don't really attach it to anything. And for the Dial Fighters, you activate their attack modes by rotating the dials on the top until something gives way, like a latch will give way and allow something to be manipulated, basically. So there is kind of like even on the Trigger Machines, there's kind of like an action that you do, but then you still have to manipulate it into the way it's supposed to go. So it is like a semi-automatic process, I guess you could say. So what we do with Red Dial Fighter here is we turn the dial, and it does make a clicky sound if you do that, but there are going to be certain points where it's going to release the latch, and in this case it will just drop the front fuselage. And what you want to do is you want to basically make it so that's at a 45-degree angle, not 45, a 90-degree angle. I keep getting 45 and 90-degree angles mixed up, I don't know why. And then you have to basically turn the dial so that it's pointing to 5, otherwise it's not going to look right. And basically it's going to turn whatever's in this little cavity here. So with it on 5, it looks like this little vent thing. This is actually meant to be some sort of a laser, at least that's how they used it in the show. I've seen it being used just like kind of like a regular laser that can just blast things. I've also seen it used like take on a net property to just kind of take things. But as far as how this looks, I'll be completely honest, looks kind of dumb. All you're doing is just folding the cockpit forward, and that's supposed to be in attack mode. I mean, I'm not going to try too hard to question the reality of physics in a children's superhero show, but at the same time, this isn't. I mean, this is like aerodynamic. Like you can see this is going to fly, but when you hold on, let's get this back down there. When you see that something like this isn't going to stay like airborne long enough to use its laser in any sort of utilizable fashion. Now, I could dismiss it as magic. I'm fairly sure there's magic involved that allowed it to keep flying, and it does keep flying when it's like this, but it looks kind of dumb, even if it does use it for like 2 seconds at a time. So, in all honesty, I think that overall the red dial fighter is the coolest looking of any of them, but its attack mode is the dumbest looking of any of them. But that's just how I feel about that. Next up we have the blue dial fighter, which is used by Lupin Blue. It is a prop plane as opposed to the jet we saw earlier, and of course, as you might expect, the propeller can spin. Because, quite frankly, if you make a prop plane toy and the prop doesn't spin, the propeller doesn't spin, you're making your toys incorrectly. So luckily, Bandai was able to pull this off. Super novel concept, I know. Now, the attack mode is very different for this one. So what you do, you could probably tell where this is going if you haven't seen the show already, but you spin the dial here, and the tail gives way. So then basically just kind of lock this into place and deploy the Gatling gun. This looks really cool, because you can actually tell what the weapon is. It doesn't look like a vent or anything. This is a straight-up Gatling gun, and it will just shoot things, because that's what Gatling guns do. Again, not very aerodynamic, but this is at the very least kind of cool looking. I mean, I've seen like certain things like it kind of reminds me of the B-wing from Star Wars, or I don't think B-wings were ever really in the movies. I think they may have been in like Return of the Jedi or something, but they kind of had this sort of form factor. Makes sense for spaceships though, because they're in space and they don't have to worry about wind resistance or anything or aerodynamics. But you know, on a plane, this wouldn't be very realistic, but. Again, this is a kid's show, and again, this looks a lot cooler than tilting down the cockpit and revealing a vent. And in similar form factor to the blue dial fighter is the yellow dial fighter used by Lupin Yellow. Although rather than being a propeller plane, this is I think a tilt rotor is what it's called. I've seen this sort of thing being used. I've seen actually with Sentai components that are like this. I've seen the term gyrocopter being used to describe them, but gyrocopters don't look like this. But it's basically these things that have rotors on the wings. I've seen this being used with Pat Gyro from Deca Ranger, which was used by Deca Blue, and I've even done on the channel here, but Boken Gyro, or Go-Go Gyro, rather, from Bokenger, which is, again, the Blue Ranger's thing. But basically the wings have rotors in them, and it makes kind of like a helicopter-esque thing without really being a helicopter. The attack mode is very similar to Blue's. The tail gives way when you spin the dial. You lock that in place and then bop that forward a bit, and it deploys a buzzsaw blade, which can spin, of course, because, again, if you have this sort of thing and you can't spin your buzzsaw blade, you're not making your toy correctly. Although I have seen a lot of toys with buzzsaws that don't have spinning blades, but... you know, this isn't dangerous at all. It doesn't have... They're not, like, sharp edges or anything like that. As you might expect from a children's toy. But this is a little bit more... I mean, here I am going back to, like, the realism of Super Sentai robot components. But this is a little bit more plausible as far as, you know, keeping airborne, because it still has the rotors here for lift. I just can't stop spinning this. It's as cool as it looks. Okay, this is awesome. Alright, so those are the 3 main dial fighters. So let's go on to the trigger machines, starting with trigger machine number 1, which is used by Patranger number 1. Rather than going by color designations, the Patrangers use number designations, and their Red Ranger is Patranger Ichigo, or number 1. And so we have Trigger Machine Ichigo, or number 1. I mean, usually when I refer to the Rangers themselves, I use Ichigo, Nigo, Sango, and so on, but with the Trigger Machines, I actually do refer to them as number 1, number 2, number 3, for whatever reason. That's just how I have been doing. Don't judge me. Anyway, it's a very kind of futuristic-looking police car-ish. It's kind of weird-looking, if you look at it, especially if you look at it from the front. And if you look at it from the bottom, you can tell that there are 6 wheels there, but only 4 of them are visible. It rolls around fairly well. Now, the reasoning for this is because they're supposed to be hidden, because you don't really know that they're there. But then, when you pull the trigger to activate its attack mode, that's very satisfying, by the way, it deploys not only these other 2 wheels, which were rolling all the time, by the way, but also this big red wheel in there. Now, the big red wheel does spin. In fact, I mean, what I mean to say is that you do notice that this does spin, and you can spin it, but it doesn't reach the ground or anything like that because the code bar is in the way down there. It's actually linked to the front wheels, so when you spin the front wheels, the big wheel spins. That's kind of a Rush reference, actually. Anyway, the point of this is that once these extra wheels are deployed in the show, the trigger machine goes faster. The car goes faster. So it's basically a less of an attack mode, more of a speed boost power-up mode, but I'll still take it. It still looks really cool. In fact, this is one of the ones that looks like cooler. I mean, there are some that do look cooler in attack mode, but this is definitely one of the ones that looks much better in its attack mode than it does in its normal. But let's move on to trigger machine number 2, which is used by Patranger, who is the Green Ranger. He has a... I hate to say a normal-looking car, because none of these cars really look normal. It has rougher tires on it, meaning that they don't really turn well on flat surfaces like this table, but on like a carpet or a sofa or something like that, they'll actually turn a lot easier. The attack mode for trigger machine number 2 is the front pops open and deploys a gun barrel, which you then have to kind of click in place, but it basically turns into a giant gun. That's pretty cool. I mean, you don't... From the front, you can see there's like not really a hole there, just kind of a vent, but I think that's a cool feature for the car to have at the very least. I mean, it could look better, but I actually like that action feature a lot. So let's move on to the third one, and probably the oddest of the bunch. Trigger machine number 3, used by Patranger, who is the Pink Ranger, as you could probably tell by the pink color scheme here. I'm really not sure what they were going for with the main car mode here. I mean, obviously it's a car, and does have, rolling wheels. They roll a bit better than the green one's wheels do on hard surfaces, but what's with this thing going on here? Is this supposed to be like a battering ram car? Is that what this is supposed to be, like a roll cage? Roll bar or something? This looks really stupid. I don't hate it, but I don't really get what they were going for. In any case, when you pull the trigger, it basically just bops the front of the car forward, and then like the rest of this is like entirely manual. So you have to actually disconnect this roll bar part on this end here, rotate it all the way around, click it in place, and then extend it. And it is a police baton. I don't know, but I think this might form an arm of a robot. I mean, having the baton is pretty cool. Like, even in the show, like, she kind of like tilts up at an angle and hits things on the, like, by speeding by them hitting them with the baton. But it doesn't really seem all that useful for a car to have. I don't know. It's just like the entire reason it has that sort of weird design to it is because I guess they couldn't think of any other way to incorporate a baton in there. But yeah, it's whatever. So those are the 3 main trigger machines. Now, here's the part where we go on to our good buddy, Good Striker here. Now, as I mentioned before, Good Striker does have two modes to him. He has this dial fighter mode, and he also has a trigger machine mode. Although both the combination dial and the trigger are accessible in either mode. Now, the other big thing about Good Striker, other than the fact that he forms the main robot component, is that he talks. There's actually a whole sound assembly back here. It runs off of little button batteries that it comes with. It comes with two that are already in there, and just have to pull the tab out and it works. And if you turn the knob or pull the trigger, he will talk. And the main voice clips actually come out in groups of 4. There's a common one that he'll say no matter what I guess interface you use. But then, like, if you turn the dial more, he'll say more Lupinranger related things. If you pull the trigger, he'll say more Patranger related things. So it always goes through a cycle. So if you use either one, there's one phrase that he says. Then he'll say another phrase, like if you turn the knob, it's more Lupin related one. If you do this one, it's more police related one, I guess. And then he'll start playing a little noise. Then if you spin the dial, he'll say Lupinranger. And then if you pull the trigger, he'll say Patranger. And then he'll do one of 2 random phrases depending on which one you pick. So I'm actually going to cycle through the Lupinranger sounds first. So let's go ahead and do that real quick. That's the common phrase that he starts off with. Alright, now I'm going to jump cut until I can get him to say the other random phrase. There we go. It took me like 3 or 4 tries. Alright, so those are his Lupinranger noises. Or more Lupinranger related noises. So let's go ahead and transform him into his trigger machine mode, and we'll show off the Patranger noises. So it's actually a very, very simple process. You take this front nose cone here, this attaches from the front, and then just kind of... It'll just... it doesn't really lock in place, just kind of like clicks in place. And then the wings come up. And that's pretty much it. This is the trigger machine mode. And also the wheels are accessible in either form, and they roll very well. So let's go ahead and trigger the Patranger phrases. And again, I'm going to jump cut to the other randomly said phrase. Okay, I can't remember. There might have been another jump cut there. I can't remember if he said which one he said first. I couldn't remember. So in the subsequent 2 tries, I was able to get him to say both things. But that's why there may have been 2 jump cuts. If not, only 1. Anyway, let's transform these into a robot, shall we? So we're going to start off with the Lupinranger's robot. And the transformation for a Good Striker is the same either way. There's just like one cosmetic difference, and that's it. We're going to start off by pushing down the cockpit here, and this is going to let a lock go that will allow us to pull the front forward. Then we're going to bring this whole sound assembly up like this. Also, we're going to separate the front, because that's going to be the legs. And then basically spin around facing this way, with the bottom back being up here. Let's kind of tilt that up a bit. There's another connection port here that flips upwards. And because we're going for the Lupinranger's robot first, we're going to deploy these 2 panels here. Again, just a slight cosmetic difference, but Lupinranger's robot has the red there. Also, I probably should point out that both the trigger and the dial are still accessible on the back, because that's going to be a little... not important, I wouldn't say, but there are a couple additional sounds for robot purposes. So, next we're going to take our dial fighters. We're going to take yellow first, transform it into its attack mode, and instead of just bopping the buzzsaw forward, we're actually going to twist it this way as well and collapse the wings. This is going to be the left arm. Same thing with the blue. Hold on. There we go. So we're going to face it this way, collapse the wings, spin this around, and also bring this whole assembly up, and not like before we were just brought the gun up like that. Now we're just going to bring this whole assembly up. And you can even see a fist there. So that's obviously an arm. And then lastly, we're going to take red, drop that. I'm actually going to change this for obvious face reveal stuff later. Also going to pop the wings up like this. And there's a port there that will connect onto the top port. And I'm going to go ahead, hopefully this will come out well enough, but if you can see this okay. But we basically turn the dial all the way to 0, and it will reveal the face. And yes, that is quite hard to see. Unfortunately, I don't have great lighting in here. Actually, I have a light here. I wonder if this will... It's a light that's on a rechargeable battery pack. No, that just activates that. There we go. That's what the face looks like. Again, I don't have great lighting in here. I'm not exactly a professional YouTuber, so I don't have the money for super advanced setups and whatnot, which is why I only do this on a coffee table. Gotta figure out how to turn that off later, I guess. Alright, so anyway, that is Lupin Kaiser is the name of the robot. It looks pretty cool. Wish it was a little better to see the face, but one nice touch I do have is that the dial on top of red actually makes like a top hat for him, and the top hat is very much associated with Arsène Lupin. So, very nice touch there. This does have its, you know, the same sort of obvious Sentai mecha. What's the word I'm thinking of? Articulation that you might expect. The legs do not move at all, and you do have arm movement via the connection joints. But for Lupin Kaiser, you also do have a little bit of head movement. You can move the face with the dial. I know you really can't see that well, but also because of the joints here, you do have a little bit of elbow movement, which is nice. So I do actually kind of like that quite a bit. And Good Striker does have a couple more phrases that we can do. Basically for the robots. Now, it's not triggered by anything as far as transformation is concerned. Basically, if we move the dial around enough for it to go into his Lupin mode, he'll say something, basically, until he says Lupinranger, so let's trigger that if we can. And then if we hold the trigger down, he'll say that, and that's pretty much the extent of the sounds that we're going to be hearing for that. Anyway, let's go ahead and form the other robot, shall we? I'm just going to go ahead and take these arms and head off. I'm just going to put them off to the side because we'll be looking at them later. So for the Patranger's robot, first off and foremost, we're going to put these panels back up. Good Striker's already ready to go. And then just change the trigger machines into their attack mode. Number 3 will be the right arm with the baton. Number 2 will be a gun arm. And then number 1, going to put on the top, much like we did with the red dial fighter. We're going to zoom in again for another dramatic head reveal, as we oft do on this show. So let's go ahead and rotate this bit down, and there is the face. And thus we have the Patranger's main robot, Pat Kaiser. And of course, there are special sounds for it. So if you get him to say Patranger, And hold the trigger. And there you go. So, here's the thing with Pat Kaiser. It has a very similar transformation, very similar formation here, obviously with the duality of the series going on, but it does not have as much articulation as Lupin Kaiser does. There is no head movement, and there is no elbow movement. It's all just standard Sentai fare from here. And if there was only one gripe I had about this formation, it's the head. I think the head sculpt itself is fine. It looks cool. It just looks very, very strange how it's just kind of in this kind of cavity with like a hood. It doesn't really invoke police to me. It's just kind of there. I don't know. That's just like that's like the main thing I don't really like about. But other than that, it looks really cool. I actually like the weapons. I mean, I wouldn't say that I like them more than the frickin' Gatling gun and buzzsaw arms, but the police baton and the gun are very much in with the police theme, and I actually think it works very well. Especially the baton. I really like the way that the how that just kind of melds in with the arm here, and you know, I can just put the arm up like this, and it's like like they're wielding the sword. It's basically like the sword of the robot. So I'm going to go ahead and take Pat Kaiser away for now because, like I said, we've got two vehicles back here. Because this is a modern Sentai show, we do have auxiliary mechs. And these are mechs that aren't really used by anyone in particular, but each team has one. There is one dial fighter and one trigger machine. And, yeah. So first off and foremost, we have the Cyclone dial fighter. So rather than calling it like the green dial fighter, going with the colors like the others, they call it something special because Cyclone, because it's a helicopter. It's a very odd looking helicopter, but it's got like a dual rotor thing going on, but it's pretty cool. It serves its purpose. The only thing I don't like about it is that how, with the way that it kind of transforms, this doesn't always kind of stay in place, and the rotors can be kind of crooked a little bit, but overall it does work pretty well. I do like the design of this a lot. Oh, I'm not even showing this on camera, I'm just kind of futzing about with it on my own. Now the dial is kind of way back here, which is kind of in a weird place, but when for its attack mode, the basically these kind of split and spring off, and then you just kind of make sure they're both in place, and then you fold these over like this. And this is the attack mode, which gives it a couple of spinning blades, which looks really cool. I think it's kind of weird how like the fuselage ended up. Like you have this whole big arm thing here. But you know, physics notwithstanding, this is pretty cool. Just like use your main source of lift to actually just cut things up. So that's pretty neat. So before I show off the other vehicle, I'm going to go ahead and jump cut to Lupin Kaiser, because he's about to get an alternate weapon arm. Because much like Gauranger and Abaranger and Bokenger, you basically equip the additional armaments, the auxiliary armaments, by just replacing an arm. So we're going to take the yellow arm off here and just attach the Cyclone in its attack mode, and that's pretty much it. And this is Lupin Kaiser Cyclone. And I'm going to be very honest with you, I actually like the way this looks as an arm. And I don't know why. It doesn't really look very wieldy as an arm. Like you got this big fat section here that doesn't really line up with anything else. And this whole fuselage part just kind of... But I really, really like this. I really don't know why. You got your awesome dual blades here. So... yeah, that's pretty much all there is to it. But regardless, I do like that quite a bit, so I'm happy with this. So let's take him off the table for now and take a look at our final vehicle, which is Trigger Machine Biker. This is obviously the auxiliary mech component for the Patrangers. And despite the fact that it is marked as number 4, it is not Trigger Machine number 4, Trigger Machine Yongo, or something like that. It is just Trigger Machine Biker. And it is, as you can see, a motorcycle. But not just a motorcycle with a dude on it. I think that this blue part of the helmet is actually where the cockpit is. And And it may look a little bit unwieldy due to the fact that there's this big old section on the back, but then I remembered that, you know, police motorcycles are actually kind of like that with the whole big utility thing. It reminds me of Kamen Rider Super 1, how he had the his initial bike was actually a Harley Davidson bike. It was like the only Kamen Rider to have an American manufactured motorcycle at first. That had like the big old police thing on the back. But yeah, I actually really dig this a lot. Also, I should point out, it's not really a bike, it's technically a trike. But I'm not going to hold that against it. I actually really, really like the design of this, and it rolls really smoothly. So let's go on to the attack mode. Now, in order to deploy the attack mode, first off, we got this is actually a kind of a hinge here that goes into like a wheelie mode. Now, if you have them sitting down, do make sure to hold on to the back because it does get front heavy. But then just pull the trigger and... Well, that was less than earth-shattering. Yeah, it just kind of lets go, and the front wheel kind of droops down. And then there's this weird dual hinge thing on this bar. So one of the hinges will lock in place here, and then you just kind of like roll the wheel forward until it locks in place like that. And this is actually supposed to be like a yo-yo sort of weapon. In fact, this part here actually kind of looks like a hand throwing a yo-yo down. And if you look at the detailing on the bar here, if it'll focus... I can force it to focus. Nope, doesn't need to. It looks kind of like a chain rope thing with some designs around it. So that's really... I actually really do like this. The concept of it. I just wish that the... the deployment of the attack mode was a little more exciting, but I am happy with the design. So let's go ahead and jump cut back to Pat Kaiser, because again we have some alternate arms to deploy, and again all that really needs to be done to prepare is just to take off an arm. In this case, the pink arm, and then when we bring out the biker, we actually have to straighten it back out like this. But then there's the port right there, just attach it. And this is actually quite a little bit harder to attach, but there you go. Now he's got yo-yo attack, which is not very widely used by the police, but I'll take it. In fact, you can even do kind of a thing where you fold it back up, and it does look like a hand holding onto a yo-yo, and then you can... Blip. But yeah, again, I do like the design of it. Obviously, it's not too practical, but yeah, I really enjoy that. So that's pretty much going to do it for the series at this point. This is everything that's currently been released. All in all, I am really enjoying collecting for this, and I do look forward to getting more of these. I'm just going to untransform these as I talk, But yeah, I'm really kind of interested to see where they go next with these. I have seen previews for some of them, so it's going to get a little bit spoilery here, so you may want to go ahead and turn off the video if you don't want to be spoiled for anything, because there really isn't going to be anything else other than the outro here. But I do know that they are planning on, very soon actually, coming out with a new dial fighter for Lupin Kaiser that's kind of a combination between... looks like a stealth bomber and like another thing, and it basically makes another little jet, and it makes like a sword and shield sort of situation for Lupin Kaiser. And then I think the Patrangers are getting a crane. There's going to be some sort of like remold of the littler of the sword and shield jets to make a hammer. And then of course there is also they have kind of revealed where they're going with the at least through the toy ads have revealed where they're going with the X-Trigger Ranger. I don't dare to say 6th Ranger because it's more of a 7th Ranger, but he's going to be like a double agent sort of guy. He's going to have like a silver Lupin Ranger mode called Lupin X, and then there's going to be a gold Patranger mode called Patran X, and he's going to have like his own train mecha that has 2 forms, and it's looking to get really exciting. I'm looking forward to getting more of these. I'll get them as they come out, and I'll get around to filming them when I can. But until then, I've been Rado Goji, and I'll be here next time. Join me, won't you?